Hello, friends, and welcome back to the Intuition Activation Podcast. I'm your host, Jessica, a spiritual medium and intuitive coach, and I'm so excited that you're here to join me for this intuitive development journey. How is everybody doing this week? What is going on for everyone? How are we feeling? Guys, I feel like this has been a really heavy couple of days for a lot of us, or week for a lot of us. And I know that, with the clients that I've been working with this week and just everything that's been going on in the news, it's been heavy. It's been a heavy week in the world this week. And, between and I'm not really someone who spends too much time watching the news or paying attention to the media, but the word still gets back. And I know that there's been a lot going on in the world right now. And I wanted to bring this week's episode to you in the wake of everything that's been going on and everybody's sort of reaction to it. Because there's been some blatant anti Semitism in Europe, an essential pogrom there. There's the war in Israel slash Gaza. There's, the war in Ukraine. A lot of people feeling affected by the American presidential election, the hurricanes in the South. I mean, there's just been so much going on. And all of these messages we're constantly being bombarded with are potentially triggering a lot of us right now. And so maybe if you're like me, you kind of like to bury your head in the sand and try your best not to pay attention to it, because perhaps it can affect you too deeply or too negatively, and you're just trying to protect yourself. And maybe you are trying to be an informed citizen and you are paying attention to all of it. But the side effect of that is that everything that's going on is causing you a lot of emotional distress. And the truth is, guys, in times like this, when it feels like everything is falling apart, I want to remind you that there was always a silver lining, because when you are being pushed to your edge, when the majority of people are being pushed to their edge, they are also being pushed very strongly into their spiritual growth. You start to search for something more in your life. You can't accept, you start to get to a place where you can no longer accept that this is all that life has to offer. You have to start searching for meaning behind everything that's going on. And so, a lot of us are being placed in this position where we're suddenly having to really go inward and look within to try and find some peace and maybe some sanity. And in that process, maybe we begin to reevaluate reevaluate our priorities. Maybe we think it's time to realign, reassess, kind of decide what's best for us. And I would argue that this has happened to us on a global level before. When we think about COVID, the whole world was put on pause, and many of us were very triggered by the events that were going on. A lot of fear that came up in all of us. And that global pause that happened did force a lot of us to stop and pause and reevaluate, reassess, and completely shift gears. This was sort of like a global spiritual awakening. And I do want to argue that maybe it wasn't enough. Maybe a lot of people woke up because of COVID. I know that was one of the biggest awakenings for me. It was part of the reason that I was pushed to finally just leave my teaching career. And I did push myself onto this path and partially because COVID had happened. And it was the last kick I needed to completely let go of teaching. And so, that was really effective for a lot of us. And some people still buried their heads in the sand and still went back to their regular life when COVID was over. And so now I'm wondering if maybe everything that's going on in the world right now is a second wave, a second push to force people to really go inwards, to act as this crazy train of events that's triggering or becoming a catalyst for change within you. And perhaps it's the pressure cooker that you need to make the ultimate shift and finally undergo a spiritual awakening, a spiritual upgrade. Perhaps this is something that you've needed for a while. And so today's episode is going to be all about that, about signs that you are maybe being pushed or triggered into a spiritual awakening, right? That you are in this boat of everything that's going on is forcing me to reassess, reevaluate, realign. And so we're going to talk about that today. How do you know if this is happening to you? Maybe you've already gone through a spiritual awakening. I mean, I would argue that if you were listening to this podcast and you were wanting to connect with your intuition, that in some senses you are already on that journey. And the way that this episode is going to play out is that when I say signs, it's maybe more stages or phases of a spiritual awakening. The steps that I'm going to share, the signs that I'm going to share, I place them in a very specific order because this is sort of the order that we tend to kind of go into phases of awakening, phases of awareness, phases of steps that we take that kind of bring us to this place of complete peace, understanding, and spirituality. And so we're going to talk about sort of all of the ways that this might be happening to you and see if you can recognize where you might be on this journey. Which stage are you at? And I want to argue that if you feel like you've already gone through a spiritual awakening, which chances are you may have, if you're trying to connect with your spirit guides, you probably had something in your life that's already caused you to wake up from the way that you were before or change completely your outlook on life. And then this might be a frequency shift, a spiritual growth, if you will. And we go on this path of spiritual awakening over and over and over again. I mean, us as souls here on the planet, our goal is to achieve enlightenment, if you will, to really get back to this deep understanding that we are spiritual beings having a human experience. And we need lots of different scenarios to come up and arise in our lives for us to keep coming back and fully knowing and understanding and internalizing that message. And so, the steps that we're going to talk about today, or the signs that we're going to talk about today, are sort of phases along a journey of spiritual awakening. And you may have found that you have gone through many of these phases, and maybe you've done the first few but haven't gotten to the rest. Or maybe you've done the whole 11 stages and the clock has started over and you're doing it again. I would argue that for me, I've gone through several what you would call spiritual awakenings in my lifetime. So, this is sort of a set of stages, kind of like the stages of grief, right? You can go through them depending on how many times you have to grieve something. You can go through the stages of a spiritual awakening many, many times over in your life. And it just deepens that belief, that understanding, that truth, that knowledge, that awareness for you. And so we're going to definitely talk about those today. And it's funny because when I was brainstorming the ideas or the stages, if you will, for this episode, I didn't plan for it to be exactly 11. I actually had the baby with me. He wouldn't go to sleep. So I strapped him in the carrier and we went for a walk in the woods. And I had my voice notes and my notes app on my phone. And just as the ideas were flooding through, I just wrote them out in bullet points. And then when I came back to sort of put it onto my screen, onto my computer and type it out, I realized that there were exactly 11. And I think that that's so appropriate because when we talk about a spiritual awakening, right, we think about an awareness and the number that typically would signify a spiritual awakening is 11, right? Usually, when we go out through a spiritual awakening or a journey, the number that we see the most is 1111, which signify the gates of um, I guess you would call it like it's an angelic number. So you might call it the gates of heaven or the angel gates, right? Or the arches. And so it's sort of like a sign of an awakening. And so it's so funny that it just so happened to play out that there were 11 signs and symbols here, or 11 stages rather. So I thought that that was a little funny. And maybe we could add that as the 12th one, that if you're seeing 1111 everywhere, then it is potentially a sign that you're going through a spiritual awakening as well. Although I do want to argue that most of us tend to see 1111 all the time and everywhere, it just as affirmation and signs from our guides. But if that's new for you and you haven't been seeing it before, or you're starting to see it more than usual, it could be sort of your 12th one, your other little signal that you might be going through an awakening. So a happy coincidence that there are 11 stages here that we're going to talk about. So, before we dive into this week's episode, though, I wanted to start a new segment on this podcast because a lot of you guys are always asking me, can you share some of the stories of things that spirit guides have shared with clients and how that sort of played out in their lives and sort of the magic that I get to experience on almost a daily basis when I work with clients. And so, with the permission of some clients and some of the stories that have come up, I'm going to try and share one or two of those instances of just really cool things that spirit guides have shared with some of my clients and how that sort of played out for them going forward. So, this one comes from a client that I spoke with earlier this week. And she was asking me whether, she was asking her guides rather, where she should take her winter vacation. Now, she only wanted to use air mile points to book this vacation, and she was really hoping to go to Greece. But when she went online to check what the points or how much points it would cost to fly her both to and from Greece, it was way more points that were required than the points that she actually had. And she was really upset with it because she kind of really thought that that's where she wanted to go. And she was asking me to ask her guides, is this something that I should just sort of have trust that the money's going to come through and I should just book the points with the points that I have and, hope that it's the right thing and hope that everything else will kind of fall into place? Or is there somewhere else that I'm supposed to be going? And is this actually my guides trying to push me in another direction? And guys, I really love this because this is such an interesting kind of conundrum that we have, right? Sometimes we wonder, is this a test from the universe? Or is this a message from my guides, right? Are my guides telling me to do something or to not do something? And so we took a minute and we connected with her guides and we asked, is she supposed to go to Greece? And her guide said, no, that's why you don't have enough points. They said to her that she should go to St. Lucia. And so, she thanked them. She thanked the guides, and as soon as we got off our call, she went and looked up the points for Saint Lucia, and it just so happened it was the exact amount of points that she had for the flights. It was so much cheaper and so many less points than she had, than she needed for Greece. So she went ahead and booked the flights. And then she told me that usually it takes some time to transfer over the points from her card, I guess, into the account. And sometimes there's a little bit of a waiting period, right? And it kind of gets a little sketchy of like, oh no, what if the prices for the flight go up by the time the points get transferred over? And she said this was the first time when she transferred her points over that it happened instantly. And so that was complete confirmation from her guides that yes, you were supposed to go to St. Lucia, not Greece. And she had almost the exact amount of points, and then the points transferred over right away, and she was able to book her flight immediately. So just such a sign and such a testament to when we listen to our guides, how easy things can be and how easy they can play out. And she then messaged me and told me that when she looked up sort of the vacation that she was going to take, she was getting so excited about going somewhere new and going to St. Lucia. And it looked exactly like something that she would really want to do and that she hadn't considered it before. So she was really thanking her guides. And we're excited for you to go on your beautiful trip and vacation to St. Lucia. So that's my really fun one that the spirit guides have shared this week. So let's dive into today's episode topic. And before we discuss the sort of signs and stages of a spiritual awakening, I do want to do my best to define what a spiritual awakening is. And so, by my definition, I really believe that it's sort of the beginning of a journey of a waking up to a new reality, that there may be more to your life than the 3D world that you have been aware of or living in. So it's sort of that you're kind of beginning a searching or stepping into of your authenticity. You're seeking a connection with the divine. And more importantly, you're stepping more and more into the awareness that you are a spiritual being having a human experience. And so this can be sort of called a spiritual awakening, but if you already feel like you stepped into that knowledge or that awareness, perhaps we could also define this as a spiritual or frequency upgrade. And so this could sort of be that maybe we're becoming even more aware of this fact, or rather that the more that you step into this truth, you start to shift your not only your understanding or awareness of this. So maybe from a theoretical standpoint, you understand this concept, but then this comes in waves. And so then maybe you start to shift your identity, start to shift your actions to align further with those truths that you know to be true from a theoretical perspective. And now you sort of take yourself into more of the practical sense of shifting your actions and your mindset accordingly to these truths that you know to be true. So there's sort of two ways of looking at this, right? An initial spiritual awakening, which you might kind of say is sort of the catalyst of an awareness overall, right? That there is more to life than this 3D world that I find myself in. And then there's sort of the subsequent spiritual awakenings, which are now shifting my actions, my identity, my mindset to align with these truths that I now inherently know to be true. So that's sort of my definition of a spiritual awakening or the journey of a spiritual awakening. So let's talk about the steps or phases or stages of a spiritual awakening. And so I want to start with number one, which is that how this journey might start for most people and how it gets kickstarted for most people is through what I would like to call a rock bottom moment. So the rug getting pulled out from under you, everything that you have built or created in your life for some reason gets pulled away or pulled out from under you. You are forced into a situation where you're having to reevaluate everything you've known to be true. Now, this can happen in a really radical sense, right? It can be a really major injury or health scare or job loss or loss of relationship or ending of a relationship, right? All of these things sort of make you wake up and realize, is this who I really am? But it can also be situations like what's going on right now, where, it could be a global awakening like COVID was for a lot of people, or sort of the heavy news that's going on right now, right? Many sort of rock bottom moments um, that kind of push us to kind of take a minute, take a pause, and feel like we need to step back and reevaluate how we've been going so far. So, step one is really this sort of rock bottom moment. And again, it can be a big rock bottom moment where everything gets swept away, or it can be a mini rock bottom moment where we just have to sort of stop and take a pause. I would argue that for those of you who've been listening to this podcast for the last few weeks, I had a mini rock bottom moment just a few weeks ago where I got hit over the head and I had to take a break from work for a while and kind of go, whoa, I've been running myself ragged, right? For some people, getting just the common cold can be acting as a pause of, oh my goodness, I keep getting sick, right? Why am I sick? Or even just getting, a regular stomach flu, for example, where you're kind of down for the count for a few days. You're sort of forced to take a minute, to pause, to reassess and kind of go, how did I get myself here that I'm so sick, right? And that I'm so tired and I'm so run down. And so, this is usually the kick-starting point of a spiritual awakening is that something in your circumstances, something in your environment happens to you that kind of makes you take a pause and start to look up and look around and have this realization that maybe the way that I have been playing out my life so far isn't aligned for me, isn't working for me, isn't doing me good, so to speak. And so this can happen many times over in somebody's life, but it's usually the kickstart or the catalyst for the phase of a spiritual awakening. So now that that's sort of happened, right? We have something, some sort of circumstance, some big thing in the news that triggers us, right? Cause some emotional, physical, or physical distress. Now, our step two is that you start to become very aware of the fact that there must be more to life than the 3D reality that I'm living in. What do I mean by 3D reality here, right? That sounds so, I don't know. I guess we would say it's a bit of an esoteric term, I would argue. But when I say that, it's that there's sort of this feeling of there has to be more than just the life that is in front of me, the physical things that I'm finding in front of me. There's sort of this feeling of there has to be an existence of a higher power. There have to be things beyond what I'm actually seeing in front of me. Maybe there's an awareness that there are other realms, there are other frequencies, there are other beings, there's a higher power. Things that I can't physically see, but I know have to be true, have to be out there, even if I can't prove it or I can't see it. So some of us may call this a leap of faith, others might call this a deepening of faith. But either way, we sort of start to really lean into the fact of there has to be more to life than just this day-to-day routine that I'm following here and the things and the people around me. There's more to it. And so we're really starting to ground down into the fact that there is a higher power, that there is a divine being, that there are divine beings of light who must be supporting me, that there is more to life than this life that I am seeing in front of me on a regular day-to-day basis. And so once you start to really step into this awareness, and you really kind of start asking or questioning, is there more to this existence than the things, the physical things that I can see literally in front of me and around me? Then we start to recognize that maybe I am one of those beings. If there is a spiritual being, right? If there are spiritual beings everywhere, right? Spirit guides, angels, all of the things, and there's a higher power, then maybe I am a piece of that higher power, right? I am a spiritual being. I am an infinite soul having a human experience. So that's stage three, right? Stage two is there's more to life than this 3D existence, and that there must be spiritual beings and energies out there. And stage three is I am one of those beings, that I am just a spiritual being wearing a meat suit, right? That's such a vulgar term, but it is. I'm wearing this suit, this human suit, and I actually am this infinite soul that has had multiple existences in the infinite now, if you will. And that if I am a piece of this thing and I am just energy, then there really has to be more than the physical things that I see around me, because once I leave my body, there's more to it. There's more life beyond that. There's an infinite amount of life beyond my physical realm, this physical realm that I'm existing in. So it's really starting to step into those two concepts, that there are other beings outside of me, right? There's a divine power, God, if you will. And then this idea of I might be a piece of that, right? That I am a spiritual being having a human experience. And there's this beautiful expression that I've heard over and over again by spiritual teachers, which is that you are a masterpiece, a piece of the master. And I just love that so much, because there's really sort of this understanding that when we think about and there's sort of like this idea, if we think of all of the cells that make up a human body, for example, each cell is its own little ecosystem, and it's doing its own little function, and it's here for its own specific purpose and function. But then it needs to be working in cohesion with all of the other pieces to then compose the full human body. But all of them together then make up the full thing, right? And so each one of us, each little one of us is a piece, our little soul, all combined together is a piece of the master, is a piece of the divine. And we have that always living within us. And so it's such a beautiful thing to think about. And it really then allows us to start to wake up to the understanding and the idea that I am infinitely powerful too, right? That this energy that I have within me, I am beyond powerful. I'm a piece of the master. I can really take control of my life, which is so beautiful. And that is one of our stages, but it's not the next stage. So that stage three is sort of recognizing that I am a piece of the master, that I am a spiritual being with an infinite soul that has lives that go well beyond this lifetime and well beyond this reality, this 3D reality that I'm seeing. And then we start to get into stage four, which is you start to wake up to the matrix. Now, I put matrix in quotations here because you recognize that this is sort of where you recognize that perhaps everything around you is just a fabrication of a societal consciousness. And I know that sounds a little bit woo woo, right? But this is sort of when people maybe start to get into the conspiracy theories, if you will, right? Maybe all of the systems that are at play here, all of the things that we are told are the milestones that we should hit in our life that are indicators of success in one's life, are really not the goal. And maybe you're suddenly no longer wanting to buy into having to hit those milestones, right? Maybe there are other indicators of success for you. So, you maybe kind of stop and go, what society is expecting of me is not necessarily what the goal is, right? And some people go through this once they've achieved all of the things. Maybe they had a list of manifestations that they really wanted to achieve in this life. There was a sort of bunch of checkpoints that they wanted to achieve in their life. They kind of went, I want to meet my spouse, right? Get married, have kids, buy the big house, have the awesome career, make $1 million, right? Whatever it is. And they kind of have all of these milestones that they think that they need to hit. Then they get all of the things they ever want and still kind of go, I don't feel fulfilled. I don't feel like this is success to me. And that's when they start to go and search for more meaning in life, right? They start to realize that the reality is that all of these things that we've been told what we should want don't actually make up for a meaningful life. And instead they start to go inward, right? This could be a version of a spiritual awakening in and of itself, getting all of the things you ever wanted and then realizing that those things didn't make you fulfilled, make you feel happy. And you start to kind of go inward and go, there has to be more to life than this. There has to be more than the 3D things that I've been chasing after. So that's part of it. You wake up to that matrix. Then there's the other matrix, right? Which is sort of the conspiracy theories, right? Where you realize that there's been a lot of lies that have been fed to me to make me and keep me stuck and keep me away from my recognition and my understanding that I have complete control of my life, right? And so when I say conspiracy theories, right, I mean, there are some people who go down serious rabbit holes here, and I'm not going to get into all of them, but there are things where we kind of go, are the things that I have been that media is feeding to me or society is feeding to me that are actually for my highest good, or are they moving me away from the realization and the understanding of how powerful I am? So what am I being told about what is healthy for me, right? For good for my health? What am I being told that is considered proper education? What am I being told about how I should handle or manage my money? How am I being told about how I should or shouldn't spend time with my family and friends? What am I being told about the things that I should or should not consume? Right. And so suddenly all of these systems and structures feel like they are dependent on keeping me and holding me back from recognizing my true power, that I am a spiritual being having a human experience, that I am a piece of the master, that I am powerful and in charge of my own destiny. Right. And so then we really start to kind of want to move away from those systems, the things that are kind of keeping me stuck, keeping me small, keeping me in victimhood mentality. And I do want to warn people here because a lot of us on the journey of a spiritual awakening can tend to get stuck in phase 4 here, which is waking up to the matrix. Some of us get stuck on the conspiracy theories. Some of us get stuck on this war between good and bad, light and dark, right? What are the things that are trying to keep me away from my true self? And I want to caution you that if you are in this phase, if you find yourself in this phase, and I plead guilty to that as well. I've definitely gone down that rabbit hole many times. It doesn't help us move forward. You have to acknowledge it and recognize, what do I or don't I want to participate in anymore? What am I seeing as lies versus truth for myself? And what is helping me get back to my true self and my authenticity, what isn't? And then just leave it, right? A lot of us sort of feel the need to wake up the masses, if you will, and make sure that everybody knows that these are conspiracies. And when we do that, it not only does it kind of cause arguments for people who aren't ready to hear those things, but it also keeps you stuck in that phase and doing anything about it, right? It stops you from moving forward into action, right? It's one thing to have awareness of these things, it's another thing to actually do something about it that's productive for your own life. So I do want to caution you that if you do find yourself in phase 4 in waking up to the matrix, that you don't get stuck in this endless loop of trying to prove the conspiracy theories, if you will. And I want to also add here that, but from a personal perspective, that there it's not helpful to try and figure out, is there one specific person who is kind of creating these stories, right? And being in charge, or some body or group of individuals that are in charge of creating these structures and systems. I would argue that there's not one particular person or mastermind behind any of these conspiracies, if you will. It's really just a collective agreement, a subconscious agreement of we're not wanting to or ready to be aware of how powerful we really are. And sometimes it's easier to fall victim to or play victim to the structures that have been created collectively. And so this is really a time where if you realize you don't want to run on the hamster wheel anymore, right? Maybe you recognize that this idea of working 9 to 5 and working for 60 or 35 years so that you can retire when you're 65, only to, not enjoy your life because then you have all of these health concerns, doesn't appeal to you anymore. And you realize that you want to get off the hamster wheel. Instead of trying to tell everybody else that they should get off the hamster wheel, get off the hamster wheel yourself. Do something about it for yourself. Don't get stuck in waking up to the matrix. Phase 4 can be very tricky and sticky. Um, but that is phase 4, getting stuck or waking up to the matrix. So this is where I really want to push you into phase 5, which is starting to take radical responsibility for your life. You suddenly start to recognize that you are living a life of your own creation. And I heard this really beautiful saying from this wonderful woman. Her name is Kathy Heller, and she has an amazing podcast. Definitely go check her out. And she had said this on a podcast that I had heard many, many years ago while I was still a teacher. And this phrase still sticks with me. And I feel like I've said it many times before, but she said, "You are living the life you are willing to tolerate." And I'm going to say that again. You are living the life that you are willing to tolerate. If you are not enjoying the circumstances of your life, take radical responsibility to the fact that you have brought it on yourself. You got yourself to this point. You are not a victim of your circumstances, but rather a creator of your circumstances. And if you don't like the way that your life is playing out in this moment, create again. Create again. And so this is where you become radically responsibility to really step into that. This is where I'm at right now. I don't like it. I'm going to make a shift. I'm going to make a change, and I'm going to do something different about it. I don't like the systems that I found myself in, right? I don't want to fall into line with the sheeple, right? The people, right? The sheep people, the sheeple. I don't want to run on the hamster wheel anymore. I don't want to live this life or follow the expectations that have been placed upon me. I am going to do something different. And you're going to take complete responsibility for that. This is where we really move out of the victimhood mentality. This idea of I am a victim of the circumstances I found myself in. And I don't want to be insensitive here, where, yes, I do recognize that some of us have had really, really challenging circumstances, maybe really, really difficult childhoods, or we found ourselves in war-torn countries, or in poverty or communism or whatever, right? There's so many circumstances that we could have dropped ourselves into. And there's even sort of the spiritual, if we even take a step back further from that, there's even the understanding that, our soul made an agreement to drop ourselves into a lifetime like that, that we chose our parents and we chose our circumstances and we agreed to that, fully well knowing that we wanted our soul to grow, that we were going to place ourselves in those circumstances to force enough spiritual awakenings to force myself into a place where I have to work through it and grow. Right? I'm going to put myself in the pressure cooker, right? Our soul made that agreement before choosing to come down and incarnate in this lifetime. I'm going to choose this particular difficult life, this pressure cooker, because I know it's going to wake me up so much faster. It's going to push me towards a spiritual awakening in a big way. Right. And maybe this is the moment where you kind of put your foot down and say, no more. I don't want to live in these circumstances anymore. And now I'm going to do something about it. I'm going to shift my life and create again. So, step 5 is probably my favorite one. It's the most inspiring one, right? And we really kind of then start to really, really play with these new principles of if I am this powerful, masterful being, master of my own universe, then I can really start looking up and researching techniques. Maybe they're manifestation practices, ways to shift my energy. Maybe I take a course and find a mentor, someone who can show me how to change my life, how to make a difference. And I'm going to try and commit to making a difference. And if there's something I don't like about my life, I'm going to create again. And I love this phase, and I can tell you I've been in this phase many times, and it's inspiring and it's motivating. And it's amazing to think that if I just make a commitment to making a change in my life, then, 6 months from now, a year from now, I can look back and kind of go, thank God that rock bottom moment happened because it forced me into this place where I took radical responsibility, where I raised my hand and said, no more am I going to live like this. And I've changed everything. And then you find yourself on the other side, thanking yourself for taking responsibility for your life. So that's phase 5. You start to take radical responsibility for your life. Now, phase 6 is a really beautiful one. It's where you start to play with the idea that your outer experiences are a direct reflection of your inner world. So, as you start to take radical responsibility for your life, you are then starting to find ways to actually shift your outer world. And the more that you kind of dive into the research around this, there's so much out there in both the science and the metaphysical teachings that really show us that our inner world, our subconscious mind, our inner energy is what needs to be shifted in order to change our outward 3D reality. Everything is energy, and we really start to step into this idea that everything is energy. Our money is energy, our mental state is energy, and the more that we learn how to shift that energy from within, I spend 80% of the time focusing on my inner gain, my mental gain, then my external life, my 3D world around me shifts exponentially. And this is so beautiful, and you can use this for so many different things. This can be used for manifesting money, right? I can shift my inward and call in all of the abundance, right? It's 80% of the work is an inward shift, an inward energy shift. I can use this for calling in a relationship, right? If I'm wanting to find a loved one or my life partner rather, right? If I shift my internal being and I start to feel, I start to really focus on infinite feelings of radical self love and self acceptance. Suddenly, my partner appears, right? So we can shift our external world by shifting our internal world. And even from a more personal level or a physical level, right? If I find myself in a scenario where I am physically ill, right? God forbid, I have cancer or I have, some sort of long term um, illness or autoimmune disease or whatever it is, can I spend time shifting my inner world, shifting my energy? And that will have a direct correlation and effect on my physical health. And so phase 6, really, this is a phase that I can argue I definitely have not mastered, but have definitely been diving into so much more. And when I do spend focused attention on this phase, on phase 6, my external world shifts so quickly and so fast. And so when we're just a little bit intentional about shifting our inward energy, our outer world, our 3D world that we've woken up to and suddenly realized is just a fabrication of our own mind, a creation of our own mind. And as I'm trying to create again, I can create everything from my inner state. Um, so there's a lot out there that can help us shift it and help us do things. This can look like meditation, right? This can look like hypnotherapy. This can look like reprogramming. This can look like inner child healing. There's so many avenues that we can look at, that we can go to, that can look like EFT. There's so many different ways that we can kind of approach this, but all of it is in the name of shifting my energy inwardly to create positive change outwardly and actually have a change on the 3D reality that I find myself in. So as within, so without, so to speak. And I really love this phase. And it's so fun to play with this when you really realize that you are truly, truly the master of your universe. And your universe is your internal world. Then everything around you shifts. So that's phase six. You play with the idea that your outer experience is a direct reflection of your inner world. Now, once you start to do that and you start to shift your energy, this is where phase seven starts to happen, which is that suddenly all of your relationships start to look and feel different. Now, guys, this is a hard phase to be in. I've definitely been there several times. And so, but you notice, maybe you start to notice that some of the relationships or people in your life, maybe some of those relationships start to feel a little bit more surface level than they used to. Maybe you start to recognize that some of the relationships you have been a version of you accepting a lower version of your self-worth, and so you are being treated in a way that reinforces that low self-worth that you've accepted for yourself. And as you wake up to this idea of how beautiful and powerful I am, suddenly it doesn't feel good to exist in those relationships anymore. um, Perhaps as you start to embrace this awareness that you now have, that you start to step into and shift your energy internally, perhaps there are some relationships or there are some people in your life who will feel threatened by this. They see you starting to make big strides and changes in your life. You're vibrating higher, your energy is shifting in a big way. And what this does for some of the people around us who are still, quote unquote, asleep, who have not gone through a spiritual awakening as of yet, it can feel threatening. It can feel um, blinding, if you will. If you're shining so bright, suddenly it's like you're too bright and they need sunglasses and they need to shield themselves. And what you will find with people in your life who are not ready to take on this idea that they are just as powerful as you are, right? We are all these infinite beings. And this idea of how powerful we are can be scary for some of us if we're not ready for it. What they will try to do is try to pull you back asleep. They will try to pull you back. They will become a naysayer in your life. They will try to convince you that stepping onto this new path is silly, it's unsafe. And of course, many times they'll do this out of love, right? They'll tell you to keep your 9 to 5 job because it's safe, right? They'll tell you not to sort of do those silly manifestation practices because it's dangerous, right? They're going to use whatever tactics and tools they have to try to keep you stuck. And of course, they maybe do it with good intentions. They do it out of love, or they're doing it out of fear because it is too bright and blinding for them. And they are trying to dim the light so that they don't have to deal with the discomfort of standing in the wake of something so bright. And so this can really force us to take a deep look at our relationships. As we grow and shift, sometimes we outgrow some of the people around us. And even though they love us, if they're trying to pull us back, if they're trying to keep us stuck, if they're trying to um, keep you in a place that makes them feel more comfortable, then sometimes we have to let those relationships fall away. And that can be a really isolating and a hard place to be in. The only advice I can give you in this place, when all of your relationships start to look and feel different, is to trust that you get to be the light. You get to be the example. And so, even though you're growing fast and you're growing bright and you're growing strong, and this can be uncomfortable for people around you, hold on to your convictions, hold on to your awareness, because some people in your life will wait and see the results. And when they see the result of you making these radical shifts and they see you through to the other side and they see how happy and fulfilled and magical you feel, sometimes it will be the catalyst that they needed or the push that they needed to wake up themselves. And they'll suddenly go, oh my goodness, what Kool Aid is she drinking? Because I want some of that. I want a piece of this life that you've created for yourself. How do I do what you've done? And even if it looks like they judged you at first, sometimes if they wait long enough, they see you through to the other side, it will be the inspiration they needed to get to the other side themselves. And so it can look like just kind of giving them pause and trusting that they too will wake up eventually. They too will find themselves on a spiritual awakening. And if they're not ready to come along with you on the ride at this moment, sometimes this looks like having to create strong boundaries, um, and maybe not sharing all of the truths that you have learned yet so far. Know that they will come around eventually, and if they don't, then it's not your job to wake them up, right? And so it can feel isolating at times. It can feel like suddenly I've outgrown all of the people in my life, and they don't get where I'm at in this moment, and that can be so hard. And I then encourage you to find other individuals who maybe are on this path, who are going through a spiritual awakening, who are playing with the rules and the laws of the universe and seeking out to shift their inner realities to shift their outer reality. And when you find those people, you feel more secure in your convictions to make a change as you take radical responsibility for your life. And so it can look like creating some space and distance from the people who, although maybe lovingly, are trying to keep you stuck and pull you back asleep. Don't listen to them. Instead, be the light for them. And the other thing I want to add to this is that sometimes we love the people in our life so much. And when we wake up to these new realities, these new truths, all we want is what's best for them. And we really, really want to bring them along the ride with us. We don't want to leave them behind. We don't want to create space and walk away and go and grow our amazing dream lives. We want them to come with us. And we want them to see how magical this can be. And it can be so painful when we try to do that and they resist and resist and resist because they're not ready. As I said, when your light grows bright, for some people, it can be blinding and uncomfortable. They're not ready. It feels safer for them to sit in the darkness for a little longer. And sometimes we have to be the ones who just sort of let go for a moment. And we just say, I'm going to put things on pause. I'm going to do my own thing over here. I'm going to love you as you are with the knowledge and understanding that you have. I'm going to grow my life, and maybe they'll come around later because I will be the example of what happens when I take radical responsibility for my life and my inner world. And so I ask you that, and I am definitely guilty of this. I know that when I went through my spiritual awakening, all I wanted to do was share this with my husband. I wanted him to come along the ride with me. I wanted him to do the manifestation practices with me. I wanted him to learn about doing the meditation and shifting his energy. And I kept giving him all these meditations that I wanted him to do and trying to take him to the spiritual healers and do all of the things. And he wasn't ready and he didn't want to and he resisted. And there was a grieving place that I had to go through, a kind of a moment of grief that maybe I was going to change my life and he wasn't going to. And, what did this mean for our relationship? And I'm definitely going to do another episode with my husband, Ellie, to share how we sort of got through that because it can be hard when we've sort of committed our lives to somebody else, right? Maybe with friends, we can take a pause and a break, but when we're living and growing together with somebody, it can be hard if one person is growing and the other one's not ready, right? But ultimately, what happened is I had to let it go. And I had to trust that eventually he would come around to his own version of a spiritual awakening and that the teachers that lit me up weren't going to be the ones that lit him up. And that's been the truth. He came to it on his own. He found his own spiritual teachers much later on, years later, right? He came to his own conclusions later. And all I had to do was be patient because what happened was he saw how much I grew my life and how much I shifted and changed and how much I shifted my reality and how much happier I was. Suddenly, he wanted a piece of that happiness pie, and he found his own way to spiritual awakening and found himself down his own path. And he's still walking down it much slower than I would like, right? And I kind of want to bring him over here to the other side. He still has no idea how I manifest things so quickly. And I keep offering him the courses that I've taken, but he's not ready to take them and he doesn't want to. And I can't force him. And so the advice that I will say is let them grow in their own time. And even though you love them and you want to bring them along with you, trust that the only thing you can be is the example. So lead by example. So if your relationships are shifting, it's part of the process. It means that you are growing. Don't allow people to pull you backwards. Instead, become the light, be the example. So that's phase 7. Your relationships all begin to shift. Now, here's number 8. And I kind of feel like most of you, if you're listening to this podcast, is probably where you're at in your spiritual journey, which is that you start to seek out and cultivate a deeper connection to your intuition and the divine. right? You realize that it is one thing to shift my inner energy. It's another thing to co-create with with the divine, with the a higher power and the things that are out there. That I am just a piece of the master, but that I work in tandem with the master, with the universe, with God, whatever you want to call it. And that if we connect to each other and we work together, we can create infinitely more magic than if I was doing this all on my own. And so this is where you really start to try to maybe cultivate a relationship with your spirit guides and your angels. Maybe you start to cultivate a meditation practice, or you use oracle cards, or you lean into a prayer practice and connect with the divine in whatever way you possibly can. You really start to seek out and start to listen to your intuition. You start to recognize that there's only so much I can do on my own, and that I'm always being guided, and that I can connect to this higher power, this source that can give me and help me along the way, so much more in ways that I could never even comprehend on my own. And there is a plan that's bigger for me than the one I dreamed up for myself. And this is really such a beautiful phase to be in. And I know that you're on this part of the journey if you're listening to this podcast. So, kudos to you, because this is really such a big part of it. Your life gets so much bigger and so much more magical when you recognize that I don't have to do this all on my own. Yes, I can shift my inner energy, and I am not alone in this. I'm not alone in this, which can also feel comforting when our relationships around us are shifting. So that's really a beautiful one. So that brings us to phase 9, which is where you start to become aware of all of the ways that the divine is intervening into your life. And so you start to feel really, really, really start to believe that nothing is a coincidence. You start to see that everything in your life is happening for you and for your highest good and not to you. And you start to become really, really aware of all of the signs and symbols and synchronicities and ways that the divine, your spirit guides, your angels are there for you all day long, and that everything feels like a message and a sign and a symbol from them. I really want to encourage you to go back and listen to last week's episode, episode 44, about this, because there really are so many ways that your guides are sending you messages all throughout the day. And when you start to be aware of those, you really feel like you are not alone, and that every step of the way you are being guided, you are being helped, and you are co creating your life with the divine. And it is so beautiful. And so I really love this phase, and it's really something that I have really been grounding down and into and trying to open my eyes to more in my day to day life. That it's not so much about necessarily seeking out the relationship with our spirit guides, setting aside time to connect with them, but rather connecting with them all day long and seeing how there are so many ways that they are speaking to us and communicating with us all the time. So I really love that one. Okay, that brings us to phase 10. And this one was phase 10 was inspired by a private coaching client of mine. So, Kim J, if you are out there, this one is for you. I was not aware of this one until she brought it forward to me. And now so many of my clients are telling me that this is a thing for them, which is that your ears are ringing. Guys, so many people have told me that when they feel like they're going through a spiritual awakening, a frequency shift of some kind, a spiritual upgrade or spiritual up level, feels like their ears are ringing all the time. And they can't figure out what it is. Guys, I have figured out what it is. When you are attuning to new frequencies, so think of it sort of like your spirit guides are on a different radio station, right? And when you're spinning through the different radio stations, you can get static in between if you're not on the right station, right? When you do tune into the right frequency, the right station, then suddenly all the messages become clear. So if your ears are ringing, it's because something or someone is trying to give you a message and you haven't taken the time to tune into the frequency, or to take a pause and to get quiet to hear the messages that are trying to come through. So if your ears are ringing, then this is a sign for you that you need to go back to step 7, which is, or sorry, to step 8, which is starting to seek out and cultivate a deeper relationship and connection with your intuition. Because if your ears are ringing, you're upgrading to a higher frequency, that there are other beings and other frequencies that are trying to connect with you, that there are messages that are trying to get through, and you're not hearing them in that moment. So if your ears are ringing, it's a sign of an up level. It's a sign of a spiritual upgrade. It's a sign that you need to be paying more attention to step 8 and 9, that you need to seek out and deepen your intuition. You need to get quiet and create more opportunities to connect with your spirit guides. And you have to start paying more attention to the ways in which the divine has been intervening with you. What signs and symbols and synchronicities have you been missing? And why is there a spirit guide or a loved one or an angel who's trying to scream it at you, and it's causing your ears to ring because you can't quite hear? You're not quite tapped into the right frequency to hear it. So if your ears are ringing, it's your big signal to go back and repeat step 8 and 9. So Kim, I hope you're getting a little chuckle out of this one, because I did not know about this one. I personally never really experienced the ringing ears, or really never paid much attention to it. And then once she brought it to my attention, so many clients of mine came forward and started telling me that they were having ringing in their ears too. And every time we connected with their guides and asked what was the ringing in the ears about, it was this idea of, we're trying to tell them something. We've been sending all of these signs and symbols and they weren't paying attention. They weren't listening. We were trying to get them to tune in. So if your ears are ringing, it's your sign to sort of get quiet, to go back inward, and to listen and look out for those signs and symbols and messages that are coming from your guides. They're trying to co-create or share something with you that you just not quite tuned into in that moment. And finally, let's look at step 11. And step 11, I would argue, is possibly the hardest one, to really fully internally, or to really fully internalize, which is that slowly over time, you really start to wake up to the idea that we are all one. So just like that example of what I shared before, which is sort of like we are all we are all the cells that make up a human body, right? We are all the little pieces of the patchwork of a big quilt, right? All of us together create what is the universe. Create, and we are all kind of the makings of source together. And this is such a hard concept for us to understand, because we know that, there is that we are individuals with our own identities, and sometimes we feel so separate from everyone around us. But the more and more that we kind of lean into this idea that all of us are just a piece of the same bigger picture, it can really be such a unifying understanding and awareness. And the way that we then show up in the world, we start to realize that when I heal myself, it heals others, right? And again, this idea of as within, so without, right? And so it's not just that my circumstances shift when I shift my inner reality. Everyone around me shifts too, because we are all one. We are all a piece of the same big puzzle. And this is one that becomes so hard to sort of conceptualize and understand. And, the more phases of spiritual awakenings that we go through, the deeper this understanding becomes. And this was one that was such a hard concept for me to grasp. And as I started on my spiritual journey, I really I understood it theoretically, but I never really internalized it. And this is one that is really more and more becoming an awareness for me. Definitely as I go through my parenting journey, when I see my son kind of going bananas, right? And I kind of go, it's him, it's not me, and I create separation between us, that creates frustration. And then when I realize that if I shift my energy, then his energy shifts, because we are one, it really, really, parenting is a whole other, spiritual awakening in and of itself. But, you know, this really is a concept that we need to sort of, that can take a lifetime to really grasp. It can, and it can take a myriad of experiences and different experiences for us to really ground into this idea. Um, but definitely, if you are very slowly starting to wake up to this idea, starting to accept this idea that we are all one, that it's not me versus you, but that we are all pieces of the same thing, the same puzzle, then you are definitely well on your way through a spiritual upgrade, a spiritual awakening. Okay, guys, that was a lot. Those were our 11 steps or stages of a spiritual awakening. I am going to quickly go back and recap them for you, as briefly as possible. So, number one is that you have some sort of rock bottom moment. Number two is that you realize that there is more to life than the 3D reality that you are living in, and that perhaps there is an existence of other spiritual beings out there. Number three is that you start to recognize that you are one of those spiritual beings having a human experience. Number four is that you start to wake up to the matrix and recognize that you no longer want to buy into some of the stories that you have been told as milestones that you should or should not hit in your life. Number five, you start to take radical responsibility for your life. Number six, you start to play with the idea that your outer experience is a direct reflection of your inner world. Number seven, suddenly all of your relationships start to look and feel different and everything starts to shift. Number eight, you start to seek out and cultivate a deeper connection to your intuition and the divine. Number nine, you start to become aware of all of the ways that the divine is intervening in your life through signs, symbols, and synchronicities. Number 10, your ears are ringing. And number 11, you wake up to the idea that we are all one. Guys, I'm wishing you so much luck as you go through this very challenging time. I know that at this time, it can really be challenging to be in a place where it feels like everything around us is falling apart. And maybe, just maybe, this is the time that it becomes a wake up call for you and that you are being catapulted onto your own spiritual awakening. And so, no matter how fast or slowly you are going on this journey, no matter which step or phase that you are in, the ultimate goal here is that you begin to recognize some absolute truths, which is that you are a spiritual being having a human experience, that you are a piece of a master and of the master, and therefore in complete control of your destiny and how your life plays out. So, while you can't control what's going on around you right now, you absolutely can control how you respond to it. And I hope that your response is to set yourself on a path of spiritual growth and spiritual awakening. So, my suggestion in this time when you're feeling emotionally distressed by everything that's going on in the world is to go inward, find your light, find your inner peace, because as within, so without, change your inner vibration, and everything around you is going to shift too. Sending so much love and light to you as you head on your spiritual awakening journey. And I wish you such a beautiful and peaceful rest of the week. Bye, you guys.